like it's nonpartisan, but it actually is nonpartisan from our standpoint, I think. Am I still right on that, Nancy?
Yes.
No, she doesn't really want to discuss. That's too testy. Okay, so tonight we're presenting an educational event about water. The League supports measures that promote the management and allocation of water resources in ways that respect the environment, with an emphasis on conservation and high standards of water quality that are appropriate for intended use. We consider water issues to be dynamic and complex. The event is intended to build a foundation for the public and community users of our water resources. So on that note, I'm going to turn the rest of this over to Chris Tucker, who is behind me. Wave your hand again, Chris, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Nancy Shepard, for organizing this, and thank you to the League. But above all, thanks to all of you who've taken some time out to come and listen to this discussion about water. I serve here in Palo Alto on the Utilities Advisory Commission. I'm fairly new, we're all appointed by the city to advise council on issues related to all utilities, but water has been a very big topic this year, and it's been a crash course for me and very interesting to come up to speed on water issues. I also want to give a shout out to the Palo Alto Weekly, which has given its name as a co-sponsor to this event. I think some of the coverage they've done on water issues has been exemplary. In particular, Sherry Listgarten, who writes about the very complicated and thorny issues of water, but makes it so understandable, analytical, detailed, but understandable, in my opinion. She talks about water recycling. She talks about the cost of water. She talks about some of the political tensions between towns like Palo Alto and our supplier in San Francisco, and does a great job for the Palo Alto Weekly. So thank you to the Weekly. So I hope that tonight's conversation will answer a number of really pressing issues, but maybe for some of us just surface what even those issues are. Issues like whether water should be recycled, where we get our water, what the future of our water supplies are with or without recycling, the cost of water, and on and on. And we have a terrific panel to help explain that. I'll introduce each one as we go. We're going to start with our City of Palo Alto city historian, Steve Steiger, who will make a few comments about the history of water here in Palo Alto. But we're also joined by City Council member and former Mayor Greer Stone, who is our city's representative on the Regional Board of Water districts that work with our water supplier, San Francisco. You'll learn all this from Greer's comments, but he represents the city, specifically the council, on these regional water issues. Peter Dreckmeyer, to my left, also a former mayor of Palo Alto, but now for years, one of the community's leading advocates for water issues of all kinds, in particular, our specific water source, the Tuolumne River. Peter heads policy for the Tuolumne River Trust and is, I've found, very knowledgeable on water issues, speaks at a lot of our council and utility meetings on the topic to advise. And I'm especially pleased that Felicia Marcus has come down from Emeryville. Felicia is at Stanford now. She's in the Stanford Water in the West program on faculty, but for several years, starting I think with the administration of Jerry Brown, Felicia chaired the California State Water Control Board. Before that, she has years of experience at some of the biggest water districts in our state, Los Angeles notably, speaks today widely and globally on water issues and consults. So I've had the pleasure of hearing Felicia's thoughts on this several times, and I think we're in for a treat there. So let me stop now and ask if Steve Steiger could open us up with a look back. And I think he might take us way back to water issues here in Palo Alto and the region.
Thank you. When the ancestors of the Ohlone people first crossed into North America continent across the Bering Strait several thousand years ago, they were able to do so because the Earth was in the midst of one of the ice ages that lowered the oceans and allowed these people to cross into North America. Had those same people come down into what is now the Bay Area, the effects of that ice age would have lowered the Pacific Ocean to such a degree that you could have walked from the future San Francisco to the Farallon Islands. The Bay Shores waterline would have similarly been quite different. By the time the Spanish explorers visited the peninsula in the 1700s, the landscape was similar to today's landscape, except that the bay waters seasonally reached roughly to Middlefield Road. Numerous freshwater creeks and streams crossed the valley floor and entered the bay, and Ohlone villages were located at the mouths of many of these creeks. The population of these villages was roughly 100 to 200 residents. By the time the Mexican land grants ranchos appeared in the 1830s and 40s, the Ohlone population was significantly diminished, primarily through disease. And the Mexican era ranchos had few people, but many cattle, horses, were all numerous, but the water was not a problem. Shallow wells, sometimes artesian in nature, supplied the population. The Robles family, who lived on their rancho in what is now South Palo Alto, were busy populating the peninsula. One Senora Robles had 29 children, and one of her daughters had 19. With statehood in 1850, the ranchos were broken up and settlers from the eastern US and Europe settled in the area, and farming, primarily wheat and other grains, shared the lands with cattle. Rainfall and creeks, wells supplied the needed water. Mayfield, the town around which is present-day California Avenue, was laid out in the 1860s, and it had far more need for wells. Eventually, there were 3 breweries in the town in the 1890s, so the water must have been sufficient in quantity as well as quality. Windmills were common to pull the water from the deeper and deeper wells required to get the water. We know the story of Leland Stanford Jr.'s death and his parents' decision to create a university. But before that, the farm housed several hundred racehorses and their offspring. But Leland Stanford also had a vineyard and a winery on the future campus site. The present-day Stanford Shopping Center was a vineyard, and the red brick building-like structure behind it, between it and the college, was the winery. Water supplies seemed to be adequate, although he did dam 2 nearby streams to bring water to the farm. Las Trancas Creek was diverted just downstream from the present-day Alpine Inn, and he later acquired another dam and reservoir, Searsville Lake. The new town of Palo Alto grew quickly in the 1890s, surpassing Mayfield's population. Wells and water tanks were the initial solution. While some early residents bought water from a horse-drawn tank wagon, most residents had wells dug either individually or in cooperation with neighbors, such as the water system developed by Professors C.V. Wing and C.D. Marks and their neighbors in Professorville. There were attempts to buy water, but not successfully, or water rights from the Menlo Park Water Company. The new town of Palo Alto in 1896 passed a $40,000 bond to fund a central water system, which was the beginning of the city's municipal utility system. A city water tower and pumping plant were built at the eastern end of Rinconada Park soon thereafter. A power plant with a large diesel engine powered the system, and a cooling pond for the engines was located nearby. The cooling pond was eventually converted into the children's wading pool at the Lucy Stern swimming pool. The historic water tower on Alma was built in 1910 as the water supply system was developed. The Mayfield Reservoir above College Terrace was built in 19 28. In the 1930s, there was concern about the falling groundwater in the Santa Clara Valley, and the answer was found in Yosemite National Park. We're familiar with the story of John Muir, Sierra Club, and others who fought against the proposal to build a dam in Yosemite. But the 1906 earthquake and fire exposed San Francisco's lack of an adequate water supply. Supporters of the dam, including the Department of Interior and the San Francisco politicians, fought for the dam using the argument that it was for the public's greatest good. The dam was begun in 1919 and completed in 1923. In 1938, Palo Alto began buying water from San Francisco delivered through a 36-inch pipe. Over the ensuing years, more and more San Francisco water was mixed with local supplies. In 1962, the local wells producing less water, and the town was growing with the Eichlers and other new subdivisions in South Palo Alto. The city switched to 100% San Francisco water, mostly from Hetch Hetchy. Beginning in the 1990s, the city began using reclaimed water for park irrigation, and water conservation was becoming a bigger part of the water planning efforts of Palo Alto.
Thank you, Steve. I personally love looking back and understanding, how we got to where we are, and that's a very useful background. When you say reclaim, do you mean, you'll hear different words for this: repurposed, recycled, but water from our waste treatment that then gets used for some of the purposes Steve mentioned. Next speaker is, as I said, Greer Stone on council and our representative to BOSCA. You'll soon learn what that means, but from Greer. But Greer, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for being here. Particularly, I want to thank League of Women's Voters. Nancy, thanks for helping organize this. Palo Alto Weekly for being a co-sponsor, and everyone else just being here on a Thursday night. One of my coworkers who's not from Palo Alto saw that I was doing this, and they said to me today, "Well, that's too bad that you scheduled it for a Thursday night during Thursday night football. The 49ers are playing. You're not going to have anybody there." I said, "You don't know Palo Alto. There's going to be more people watching this than watching the game." So appreciate you all being here. So let me share our slides. I'll bring up the presentation. All right, so I'm going to be covering, sorry, and again, my name is Greer Stone. I'm honored to be one of your Palo Alto City Council members and a BOSCA board member representing the city of Palo Alto. So I'm going to cover how water reaches your tap, what happens in the event of an emergency, who's in charge at each layer, and how those rates are set using our specific Palo Alto data. And I'm going to do all that in 8 minutes, 7 minutes now. Not a problem. For those of you who don't know, I teach AP government. And today, no joke, my lesson was how Congress gets its work done. So this is going to be a walk in the park. All right. So, as already kind of mentioned, 100% of Palo Alto's drinking water is purchased through the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Sorry, error on there. It's not consumption, it's commission. The SFPUC, the regional water system. We also use some recycled water as well. Don't worry, it's not going to your pipes for consumption, being used in various places around the city for like filling up the duck pond that everybody loves and being used at irrigation at some parks. Also in partnership with Santa Clara County Valley Water, we have done an incredible job through a variety of rebates, education, and outreach, being able to reduce per capita water use by about 15% over the past decade here in Palo Alto. So that's thanks to all of you for doing such a great job in water conservation. So thank you. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause for that. here's a great graphic that shows basically where we get our water. So about 85% of our water comes from the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. That water supply is then conveyed entirely by gravity to the Bay Area. Along the way, that regional water system picks up an additional 15% of its supply from local watersheds in the East Bay and along the peninsula. And in total, the regional water system includes 7 major reservoirs, 3 hydro power plants. And it is a beautiful site. If any of you get a chance to be able to take a tour, go up to the Hetch Hetchy, I encourage you to do so. This shows the city of Palo Alto's water system demand. And you see there it's measured in MGD, that's million gallons per day. So this shows how much water Palo Alto has used from early 1900s all the way to today. We had that large spike there between 1950 and 1970 when we had an incredible increase in population in Palo Alto. And even though our population has not declined, you can see our efforts in conservation is really paying off. So how do the pipes work? I mean, how do they actually get from the source all the way out there in Yosemite to our taps here in Palo Alto? Well, it's a large operation, and it's operated through our Palo Alto utilities here in the city. So we have 5 SFPUC turnouts, which basically feeds the water from the regional system right here into Palo Alto. We have 3 that connect to what's called the Palo Alto pipeline. It's being routed up from Redwood City, so good journey there. And then 2 connected in the South Bay. Local distribution here just within the city of Palo Alto, over 231 miles of main lines that's transporting water all across the city. We've got underground reservoirs, significant tanks, and even though the system is pretty old, about half that network was built in the 50s and the 70s to be able to accommodate for the significant population increase. We have an ongoing pipe replacement program that the council back in the 80s had established, and we've also been doing significant replacement to a lot of our pipes since 2015, after a seismic study was conducted to show where we are vulnerable in the case of an earthquake, and we've been replacing a lot of those over the last 10 years. One thing I think to feel really good about as Palo Alto is we are very much prepared in the case of an emergency. We have 8 groundwater wells and additional water storage throughout the community. And we've invested a lot in this over the last several years. And so in the case of an emergency, if the delivery of water through the regional system is disrupted, we alone can support a minimum of 8 hours of normal water demand, as well as 4 hours of designed fire suppression to be able to use that water to address any fires that might break out. We also have connections of our water pipes to surrounding cities and water districts as well. Essentially sort of a mutual aid. If we can't access the water, we can be able to share from our neighbors. And one good news too is that as far as the regional water system has so much available storage that if it were to stop raining today, which nice time to say that since we had a nice little rainfall today, if it stopped raining today, we would be able to have enough water for up to 3 years. So who governs what? It's a complicated system. I'm getting my 1-minute mark, so I'm going to try to get through this quick. The SFPUC, what do I have to?
Take your time.
Okay, well, don't worry, I'll get through this quick. The SFPUC owns and operates the regional water system. They are the ones that then deliver that water to both their customers. About 1/3 of their water goes to their customers in San Francisco, and the other 2/3 of it goes to agencies represented by the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. That's BOSCA. There are 26 wholesale customers within BOSCA. I'll talk a little bit more about them on the next slide. And then, of course, our Palo Alto Utilities that operates and the local distribution system and all the incredible work that goes into that. So what is BOSCA? It is a special district that was formed in 2003 to be able to represent the interests of 26 kind of agencies through San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. As I said, BOSCA agencies purchase about 2/3 of the water supplied by the regional water system that SFPUC manages. And we also pay for 2/3 as well of the infrastructure. And also fortunate to see a lot of BOSCA representatives in the room. If you're a BOSCA representative, can you just wave your hand so everybody can see you? Yeah, give them a round of applause too for being here. So they're all working with me to achieve BOSCA's goal, which is a reliable supply of high quality water at a fair price. BOSCA is working on a lot of things right now. I'll kind of go through this fast since I've run out of time. Okay, I appreciate it. So BOSCA agencies rely on that water from the regional water system. San Francisco has obligations to our agencies. They have legal obligations to include, to basically provide 184 million gallons a day across all those agencies, and other contractual obligations to be able to meet a certain level of service. BOSCA's region invests in water use efficiencies as well and helping reduce water use. And its member agencies are actively engaged in a lot of kind of long-standing planning studies, including one with the SFPUC. Currently, we're working on the long-term reliable water supply strategy for 2050. Regional water demand projections and sensitivity analysis, and an alternative water supply plan. And I know our utility commission that Chris serves on has been working on that issue as well. So how much water does Palo Alto actually receive? So as I said, SFPUC guarantees 184 million gallons per day to all of those agencies, 24, Santa Clara and San Jose not included. At least full-time. Palo Alto, our share is 17 million gallons a day. There are water shortage allocation plans in case we run into a significant drought. We can talk about that later if there are questions. And then really just kind of what drives rates. I know that's something that a lot of people are interested in. So in California, water rates have to follow a cost of service framework. It's unlawful for utilities to be able to earn a profit on those utility rates due to Proposition 218. And then what actually then drives those costs of service that the utility is able to recover, which reflects in your rates. It's a combination of the SFPUC wholesale water costs, the capital of those water system improvement programs, our own within Palo Alto too, because with the work that the SFPUC does with that regional water supply, as a BOSCA agency of one of the 26, we share in that proportional cost with the rest of those agencies and the SFPUC. And then here directly in Palo Alto, we of course have our own water distribution system. We're working on kind of capital improvements there. Again, it's an old system. We got to maintain it. We got to make sure that it's safe and reliable in the event of an emergency. And of course, the operation and ongoing maintenance costs associated with it as well. Now, Palo Alto has a goal of not allowing those rates to increase over 10%. And staff has been working to delay some capital projects, using some of our reserves as well to be able to keep those costs down as much as possible. We are working as hard as we can on that. So my last thing, what you can do to help, of course, continue to conserve. We've been doing a great job on that. Prepare in case of an emergency, right? Again, I think the speculation is that we're likely to see in the next 30 years an earthquake like the 1905 earthquake, which could, worst case scenario, shut down water access in the Bay Area 20, 30 days, if not longer. So being prepared for that terrible circumstance by supplying water in your home, and engaging. Read, follow what Bosca's doing, follow what the city council, the UAC, stay engaged, and just as you are here tonight. So thank you. I'm sorry I ran long, but I appreciate the little extra time.
Take the laptop.
Yes.
Two of the numbers that I hold on to from Greer's presentation are those million gallon a day metrics that he mentioned. 183 million gallons that, as I understand it, San Francisco commits to its 26 local districts like Palo Alto. And Palo Alto, the other number, the 17 million that Greer mentioned, which is the volume of water that we are entitled to through our contract with the city. I also think back to that graph you showed, Greer, maybe you have a comment on this now, but you showed that we peaked at around 17, 18 million gallons a day here in town many years ago, but conservation efforts have driven that down. So today we're at 10 million. We were at 17, now we're at 10 million. We can count on 17 million from San Francisco. Should we think of that as something of a buffer?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say it's a good buffer. I think it's one to be mindful of, right? We never know what the future is going to hold, especially in a drought-prone state. So I think it's great. We're also going to see significant increase, right, in housing and other uses, AI data centers that require a lot of water as well.
Right.
So I think it's a strong buffer, but let's not take it for granted.
Sure. Good. Well, now we're going to introduce Felicia Marcus. I mentioned her background already. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a more prominent authority on the topic of water in our state. I really appreciate you coming down to join us. I mentioned metrics a moment ago. Hang on to your hat, because million gallons a day. One problem I've broken my brain on in water is that you'll also hear acre feet, and then you'll look at your bill and find cubic feet and 100 cubic feet. So we'll try to translate that all as we go. But now we're going to zoom out, and Felicia brings a really macro view on all things water. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. My favorite is a unit. You know what a unit is? Like something like 618 gallons. That's how a lot of water agencies charge. It's like going back to cubits or something. It's sort of kind of an amazing thing. Well, oh, it takes a second. All right, in any event, well, let me thank you for inviting me as well. That was great. And I really appreciate being invited. The fact of the matter is I will go anywhere that the League of Women Voters or Rotary Club ask me to, for a variety of reasons, just because I respect both institutions so much. And then if you throw in Peter, who's one of my heroes, I'm in. And I also, there are a bunch of my heroes in the room, and I'm not going to call you all out because I only have 20 minutes and I'm going to try and go really, really fast, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy to be able to be here. Let me just give you a little bit of a sense of what I'm going to say. And this please wait patiently for the failure of the system is just a picture I couldn't resist putting into all my water things. But I spoke to a bunch of delegates from city government in Beijing the other day, and they didn't get it because when they read the Chinese, it translated to, please wait, we're fixing the system. It was just one of those translation things that always happen. Yeah, I couldn't figure out why they didn't think it was funny, but I should have been able to figure out why they didn't think it was funny. And then a start on my, everybody has certain biases and certain approaches, and it is baseball season and going into the playoffs. And, Yogi Berra is known for saying all kinds of things, like it's deja vu all over again, and nobody goes there. It's too crowded. Nobody goes there anymore. Things like that were just great. But I found this gem of, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And that is completely true of water. I will tell you also in advance that the universal answer to almost any water question, particularly in California, is it depends. because there's no one answer. And that is one of my hobby horses, and that the dialogue about water in California and a lot of what you see in the media is an is so is not, you're a jerk, no, I'm not kind of level of discourse, or something like a Monty Python routine, depending on even Abbott and Costello, kind of depending on how you look at it. And it actually takes a lot to have a sense of it. Now, I'm not going to, no, I missed one. There you go. Okay, I just have to be patient, right? I probably just did it again. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to try and do California water basics, but I'm going to say off the top that it's going to, oh, I did it again. I'm going to, I'm going to say off the top that I'm not going to be able to give you a full picture of it, but I'm going to do my best. But I'm also going to talk quickly, which I know is annoying and violates every Toastmaster rule that was ever expanded. I'm going to do more than 3 things, but I'm not going to have a quiz at the end of it. I'm just trying to give you a menu of things that we can talk about, and just know that there's something deep beneath each of these, and there are a lot more topics that I'm going to be able to get to. We'll focus on Bay Delta a bit, and then Chris gave me a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to try and touch on some of them, but I'm just trying to set up our discussion, and hopefully we can then talk about whatever it is of interest to you. Quick thing, it's just climate change is a big defining moment in water. Water is really where climate change is felt most. We have plenty of issues even without climate change, but climate change really changes the game, and water is really the bleeding edge where it's most felt, either in floods or in drought or in sea level rise. And frankly, in California, we have all 3 of those. Again, it depends on where you are. Some places have all of them, and bless their hearts, it's going to be hard, and climate adaptation is going to cost even more. But we have a lot going on. But you see parts of the country where flooding is the big issue. Part of it is that pressure on sea level has an impact on groundwater through seawater intrusion. In places like the Bay Area, sea level rise puts pressure on your groundwater basin. So many of you may have read about the fact that not only will we have flooding coming up, we'll have flooding coming down, and it will mobilize toxic wastes that are in there. It's going to be quite a picnic. I mean, we have several decades to deal with a lot of this if we're lucky, but there's no time to waste. This is just another picture of something that's critical for us in the West. Obviously, we hit water stress more, but as I said, we get all of it. The other thing to know is that California really is different. Everybody says we're different. We really are different from a lot of the rest of the country. We have the most variable hydrology of anywhere in the country, one of the most variable hydrologies in the world. And that's true in particular of Southern California, but it's true of all of California. And that leads to certain things you need to think about when you're thinking about the system. So we have this massive set of infrastructure. I don't have time to go through it all, and I'm happy to PDF these slides or clean up.
What is variable hydrology? What does that mean?
Oh, thank you. I was going to get to that a little later, but it's that it means it doesn't rain the same amount every year.
Mhm.
It doesn't rain the same time of year. It doesn't rain in the location where it's most used. It's just you never know. It's like, nobody got rich betting on the weather in California, although there may be people who do through that British, I can't remember what it's called, where you can bet on anything. Maybe in Las Vegas, they take odds. I'm not sure. But modern California really is only possible because of storage and conveyance built in the middle of the last century. In many cases, and we'll talk about this a bit, I'm sure, in the discussion, and you have some experts in the room, and Peter will talk about it, no doubt. It is a miracle of modern economic and social development that LA can function. I mean, that LA can function, but that California can function, but also agriculture, one of the 5 richest agricultural regions in the world. And it's all because of that system. The flip side is the system was built towards doing that without the modern environmental sensibilities. And I think the not sense of limits, the small is beautiful thing, but that there were limits and extension, as we're seeing globally with climate change, as we're seeing with water in California, as we've seen on the Colorado River, it's all for good things. and sometimes there's too much of a good thing, and we're losing one of the other good things. And that's our conflict, our big conflict between the ecosystem and our water demand. That's where efficiency, recycling, stormwater capture, all the other things people are doing, particularly in urban areas, and hopefully in agriculture eventually, that will lead to a greater balance, but it's very hard fought. This, I know it's too many words on a slide. It's actually a wallet card. I put it on a slide, I laminate it and hand it out from time, as I don't have any right now. And the reason I did it is because of that thing about the people who think there's just one thing. And if those bleeping idiots, whether it's in government or one of the other stakeholders, just did that one thing, if they just built this reservoir that I really love, or they built a bunch of reservoirs, or if they just conserved and recycled, we'd solve our problems. And the answer is no. It depends on where you are. And frankly, as I'll explain in just a second, with climate change, we lose our biggest source of storage, which is our snowpack. A few degrees temperature rise, all bets are off. We lose it. We're already losing it. And we saw in 2014 and 15 how bad it could get. We saw it again in our next worst drought in modern history, since we've been keeping records, happened in the early 20s, and it had a completely different set of impacts because it hit in different parts of the country. It came on really fast, and in 2 years, a lot of communities were in a place they thought they wouldn't be for 5 or 6. So the past is not a picture of where we're going to be. But when you think about that infrastructure, and we talk about dams, the dams aren't one and done. Those dams let water out, and then the snow melt refills them over the course of the year. And those dams are supposed to have multiple years of backup. Again, they don't have the multiple years they were originally designed for, in part because our population has grown so much, despite the conservation that virtually every community has seen. And the bottom line on that is when we lose that snowpack, or a lot of it, we are going to be in a world of hurt. And all the water wars that are famously talked about are going to be like a picnic. But people have to understand that we do need to plan for the future. Now,
But if the snow turns to rain, we lose
we get flooding in the spring, and we lose the timing benefit that we need, even during a single year, let alone multiple years. And so we have to plan for worse flooding in the spring, and we have to figure out how to get it in the ground. Because the only thing big enough to even begin to make up for that loss of snowpack are overdrafted groundwater basins, which are overdrafted to the tune of 2 million acre feet a year just in the Central Valley. Hence, that's why during the Brown administration, when the drought hit, he put all his political chits on getting the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act passed, which we can talk about if you're interested. But I spent a lot of time on it. Tara's here, and she's an expert on it, as well as other people in the room. But it was a play he made that he felt was important because he wanted to deal with this problem 10, 20, 30 years off into the future. And all of it takes 20, 30 years to actually manifest. And so a big, big change. But again, you have to realize that every locale has a different set of, some have all groundwater, some have all surface water, some have a mix of both. Most people in California don't see where their water's coming from. We're on the coast. We have water coming from imported water lines that are coming hundreds of miles, even from the 7 states of the Colorado Basin, if you're in Southern California. And so we don't have the same water literacy that people who watch the river go by and realize it's a living thing that is as important part of our cultural heritage and ecosystem as anything else. And that's just one of the modern day problems we have to overcome. Again, I use the elephant because the metaphor of the blind men and the elephant. I will simply say that I did have one time when I got sick, and 2 people from my staff at EPA decided to do my PowerPoint for me. And they spent a lot of time trying to guess what the elephant meant. Apparently it was hilarious when I heard the things they came up with. It was very funny. Anyway, so there's some basics on this slide that might be useful, and the rest of them are going to go faster. So here's the nightmare. We saw it in 2015, 2014. It's a taste of things to come. This is our future that we have to plan for, as opposed to fighting with each other about which thing is the most important. And as a result, I talked about the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, but Governor Brown made us do an action plan. And again, another wallet card, you can look at it later, but it was an all of the above. We can't fight about it, we have to be in action. Come with us if you want to live, was pretty much how I framed it You can't frame it that way to him because he never watches movies. He didn't get the joke at all. When I told him, see, they're trying to explain something to him, and I told him that, and he said, "What do you mean? Does that mean we'll kill them if they disagree with us?" And I said, "No, it's just a line from a movie." He goes, "No, explain it. That's a very violent thing to say." And I was like, "No, just listen to the scientists explain the Bay Delta standards." It was very funny, actually. So don't use acronyms around him either if you're talking. Those two things will derail your conversation. But it was the first place that put it all in one place, which created a little bit of peace in the warring worlds, because people could see, A, we were going to move, and B, they could see their thing. And safe drinking water was on it. It was the first time any governor really prioritized that. But it has the Bay Delta in it. It has conservation first and foremost. And so we went off to the races on a lot of these things. Newsom, whoops, I went too far. Governor Newsom has continued it. I don't have time to talk about it, but he's continued the all of the above. Sea level rise, I just have a few of the things that we have to deal with in reality. This is very important for the Bay Area. 2/3 of the economic impact of sea level rise in the entire California coast is in San Francisco Bay. Not that surprising. This is billions and billions, if not trillions. It's not surprising given it's a shallow urbanized bathtub, but still, it's rather shocking. I think this is the BC-DC map. I can't remember the time frame. Might be 2050. It could be longer. It's just the point I'm making is we've got to start now, and it's going to be very expensive in the Bay Area. But it also has an impact on the Delta, which we'll talk about a little bit today, because the Delta is a tidal estuary. And of all of those things that we always hear people fighting about those big reservoirs and what they release water for, 2/3 of the regulations they release water for is to keep water quality in the bay, okay, by repelling saltwater intrusion so that that water is usable both for farming in the Delta and human consumption, but also for export. It's very important in Contra Costa, et cetera. So if you lose salinity control, you've got a problem. And maybe 1/3 of what's left is for environment. Now, again, the water quality rules help fish too, but when people say that all those rules are just to save fish, it's actually just to protect the people who are blaming us for trying to have regulation sometimes. But that again is because people don't know. Big issue, ecosystems are in trouble. This is not the best graph, but it's the most visible one. We're losing our ecosystem at an amazing, it is on the brink of collapse because we've drawn so much water out of it that no ecosystem can survive. There are a lot of reasons and scientific things that happen, but we actually take out, and this is on the Tuolumne, and this is SFPUC plus Tuolumne, Turlock Irrigation District and Modesto Irrigation District. Certain times a year, they take 80 to 90% of the flow at times that are critical for fish. That is a conflict that has devastating impacts on the environment, even though that water goes to good uses here. So kudos to you for all of your conservation, and we're going to have to do more if we want to save that ecosystem. And Peter is doing his best, and so are a lot of other people. You also have to recognize that California agriculture is precious. It's a good thing. We produce 90% of some crops for the rest of the country and export it to the world for ourselves, et cetera. You can argue about different crops, but food and fiber are pretty important. And we import a lot of water in our electronics and goods. So there's a mass balance to be thought of. I'm not saying we don't have to constrict, but we will. But just to blame ag as if they're evil demons really isn't fair either. And most of our water consumption, while we talk about being more efficient on our lawns, and I think we need to get rid of lawns in most places and transition to more natural native plants that are equally beautiful but don't take as much water, particularly in a drought. We also need to keep growing stuff. But agriculture is going to need to shrink, and they're going to have to shrink a lot based on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and hopefully someday when we get the Bay Delta standards updated so we can get fish and the rest of the ecosystem the water it needs. But the reality is the Delta is the central challenge in California water. It's the hub of all our environmental conflicts. It is the hub of a really rich ecosystem that starts at the top of 20-something tributaries off the Sacramento, actually several tributaries on the San Joaquin, more recently focused on the three lower tributaries. It all came together to create this very rich environment, again, in the delta that used to be sort of one of those seas of grass and is now highly developed into rich farmland with those delta levees, but it is an abattoir for our fish trying to navigate it the way they navigated it for millennia before. And we have these big pumps in the absolute wrong place, right at the bottom and the bottom of what you see, but really the middle of an estuary. And they confuse fish, make it really impossible. They advantage the predators. There's all kinds of things that go wrong there. And we honestly need to add more water. We need to tighten our belts and let more water flow during critical times of year at the temperature those species need. It's not impossible, but it is painful. And it will be painful to SFPUC. Expensive, I would say, less than painful. And we have to face the fact that if we don't do that, we're going to lose the ecosystem. We already lost the fishing industry in great measure, which is also people, and is also subsistence for tribes, people, fishers. So it's a very challenging thing. And we're going to be the generation that loses it. The Bay Delta is important to folks all over the state. If you think about that Bay Delta system, it's the state and federal water projects. And some areas are 100% dependent on sources from the Delta. The Bay Area is 33% dependent on water from the Delta. And that's just the water that goes through the Delta. Goes down to Alameda Zone 7, it goes down to Valley Water. Valley Water probably has the most different sources of water there. The Bay Area, my East Bay mud, water from the McCullamy and some from the American, and SFPUCs from the Tuolumne. That's imported water too, hate to tell you. I don't think the people up on the Tuolumne think of it as your watershed. It is the Bay Delta watershed, and just because you're Northern California doesn't mean you own all of Northern California. This is where those of us from LA are like, get a grip. But and there's also a lot imported from Northern when you think about Marin and other places. And so 65%. So actually Bay Area is even more dependent on imported water by percentage than Southern California. That's not a nan or nanners. That's just trying to tell the facts on it. So you have to watch it because you can have earthquakes, climate change will disrupt it. This is just some pictures you can look at later about where folks get their water and how it works in the Bay Area. For you, it's all SFPUC, so that's easier. There are a bunch of Bay Delta issues we can talk about. Oh gosh, I really have a minute left. I'll go through them all rather quickly. The next one, again, is a menu, and we can talk about any of these. There's certainly been a lot of times when folks have come together. I didn't even put the Bay Delta Accord down in the 90s, which is probably one of the biggest things I've had a part in. But there's the issue of the tunnel now. It's gone by many names. It's currently in process, huge fight. And we can talk about some of the issues there. I can argue both sides. And again, it depends.
Take your time and there will be questions.
Yeah, I'm going to go fast though. The Water Quality Control Plan, NPR referred to it as the most important decision you've never heard of. It's something I've spent years on. It was something that the current plan came out of the Bay Delta Accord. I'm the one who signed that it was okay as part of the accord when I was at EPA, and then I was brought back to the Water Board, specifically to bring the Water Board back to its former glory, but also to update that plan. Because 20 years later, 25 years later, clearly wasn't good enough. It made progress, but wasn't good enough.
The Water Board is the Sacramento, the State Water Control Board?
Yeah, that oversees water rights, water quality, drinking water, a lot of other
EPA
things.
was federal?
EPA was federal. Thank you very much, Chris. This is good. You spot me on all this. This is perfect. And it's a beautiful thing, really. I mean, the Clean Water Act federally is based on the state model. Ours is a little better. But that's what you would expect. The states can be tougher. And it's a beautiful thing in that what it does is it says that there's got to be a body. This is part of why it's a full-time board. It was created 50-something years ago, and a very only one in the country that put water rights and water quality together, because particularly in the Bay Delta, the two were so intermixed, and you wanted to have 5 civilians from different walks of life who had the time to listen to everybody and try and balance all these competing needs. And so part of what the Water Quality Control Plan does is it identifies all the beneficial uses of that water. And the State Water Board does it because it spans multiple regional boards and it requires water rights to implement it. The others are like you have a bay plan that the regional board does, and they do something similar, where you look at all those beneficial uses and you try to figure out how to maximize. Not one guy wins and everybody loses, which is the way people argue it in most deliberative bodies, which is just a dumb way to advocate, kind of just an argument. I'm going to get to this in my last slide. But you're supposed to figure out, it's not a sweet spot, but how do you maximize all those legitimate beneficial uses? And that's what the plan does. It doesn't say ag gets all or fish get all or whatever. So everybody's a little disappointed in you by the time you do it. People who understand the system appreciate that you actually did it, and you get a paddle from the Tuolumne River Trust for actually doing it. And we did the first half of it. The first time the water board's ever actually done it without having an EPA gun to their head like they did with me in the 90s, or having a court say they have to do it like the Racanelli decision. And that was important from a governance standpoint. We only got half of it done and it hasn't been implemented. So it's heartbreaking, which is why I haven't done Bay Delta stuff much in the last few years, but I've started to come back. And then the other issue I'll mention that I think we'll talk about is when we did that plan, we did it with kind of an olive branch to say, you know, fish need water and they need habitat restoration and they need to use that water sensibly. And if a group came together with a really good plan to use it as a block of water, we said you have to share the river at certain times of year. You have to share it with the fish. And if you use that as a block of water with folks from the fish agencies and NGOs and experimented with things to bring the fish back, we'd cut you a discount because fish need both. But we set the standard high enough that the water alone could manage it because that was what we had authority over, but we could accept a deal. The current voluntary agreements or the Healthy Rivers and whatever plan that it's called are nobly named, but they don't put any more water in than we have pretty much right now. And so I don't see how they're going to work. The idea of doing an agreement is good, but it's only good if it's good enough. And so that's part of our problem. Here are some of the other issues that we can talk about if you're interested. Recycling, which a lot of people are interested in, it is exploding on steroids without steroids in it, except in some places you have to clean it up. Endocrine disruptors and all those things. But in any event, you know, it's not rocket science to treat water. It's the application of energy and money. And you actually have the ability to clean it. It just costs a lot and takes some energy. It takes less than desal, but desal has a role too. So there's a bunch of things going on and a bunch of reasons why all over the country people are doing. In the Southwest, it's water stress largely, but it's also in the Bay Area, there's a real push, particularly on the wastewater agency side, because they're going to have to meet higher nutrient removal limits because of those algae blooms we saw. And there's a long story there that actually goes back to the gold rush. It's pretty darn interesting, but I don't have time to tell you. But it's happening all over the country. Happening in LA, definitely on speed because people see more vulnerability on the Colorado and the State Water Project. And you've got the huge recycle water projects. In comparison to 17 million gallons a day, LA's plan, which I'm actually helping them on right now, 230 million gallons a day. Be the biggest in the world. 150 for Metropolitan. It used to be the imported water people. They're going to do it. These are going to take 15, 20 years to build out, but they are in active planning. Orange County's already done 130. They're the biggest in the world
I think
right
we're
now.
going to ask you in Q&A to detail some of those stories. They're very exciting and interesting, the recycling projects.
It is exciting. Stormwater capture, we can talk about if you like, the nearly $300 million effort in LA that folks voted for to do multi-benefit stormwater capture for multi-benefits or greening and everything, but also for groundwater. Just getting back to San Francisco for you, like you passed one too, to deal with sea level rise using terraced wetlands that give you the multiple benefits of recreation and ecology and actually work better at buffering sea level rise, but you're going to have to start filling the bay rather than stopping filling the bay, 200 Empire State Buildings. But there's a whole vision that San Francisco Estuary Institute and Spur put together. My husband runs the San Francisco Estuary Institute, just true disclaimer, but envisioning what you could do in the future versus just wringing your hands. And then finally, you know, data and technology will help us. It helps us with more advanced treatment at less cost, innovative sensors that can tell you how to target the infrastructure you need to replace, leak detection. Leaks can be 20, 30, 40% water loss. That's real water you've treated to drinking water standards, et cetera. There's a lot we can do. There's a lot of stuff going on with atmospheric rivers, particularly up in Mendocino, Lake Mendocino, to try and figure out how to be able to save more of that winter water without letting it go for flood control, because you can tell when the atmospheric rivers are coming. And again, I won't go through these, but people all over the state are facing common issues: how to pay for it, how to assure it's affordable, and how to provide service, and all these kind of things that are really, really exceptionally important. And the thing that individuals can do, which is sort of the last thing that Chris asked me to address, is being here and wanting to learn more, step one. Step two, learn more. Step three, show up. Vote, be heard, make your voice known. A lot of people feel that their voice doesn't matter. It does. For every person who shows up and says something, people in elective office know there could be 20, 30, 40, 400, 4,000 people who agree with that person who was brave enough to come speak. But when you do, come speak thoughtfully. Don't insult the decision maker. You would be shocked how many people insult the person they're trying to influence. Those of us who've done it a long time get over that and don't take it personally. I just go Margaret Mead anthropology about it and wonder why, what happened in their life to make them think that made sense in any way, and try to figure out what it is they really are concerned about. And maybe there's something I can do about it. It may not be what they're asking me to do about it, but that's what you do as a public servant. Very important. So there's a lot we can do, but I will stop there and say thank you.
I'm reminded a little bit of going to a really nice restaurant with a sort of an array of food. You go and self-serve, and everything is so interesting, you just can't take it all. And we've been really unfair to, I've heard Felicia speak on these topics for 1 hour, for 2 hours. Her students probably give her an entire semester.
I want to do that.
And we asked you to do it in such a short time. So it's almost like looking at all these delicious things you could have, and
how do I get back to his?
so
Sorry.
I'm hoping that
Do you know how to get back to
we do
him?
have
I'll get back to him.
we do have a support person who can help you if needed. You know, on the topic of conservation, I've heard you, Felicia, talk about leaks and lawns.
Yeah,
So
leaks and
water
lawns,
leaks
right.
and lawn replacement. I actually spoke to our utility today on that topic and was pretty impressed. Many of you in Palo Alto know that through the utility portal, mycpau.com, we have the ability to sign up, and many people have signed up for leak alerts. I wrote it down because if 5 gallons per hour are running for a 24-hour period in your sink or in your home anywhere, your hose bib, or 75 gallons per hour are running for just 8 hours, that throws a flag. And the city has alerted 6,700 people over the last couple of years since implementing this program. I shouldn't say 6,700 people, maybe it's the same person 1,000 times, but 6,700 alerts. And it has totaled 11,000 CCF. Here's where we get to those metric problems, but let me say it again, 11,100 cubic feet of water savings through the alert program. It's an impressive accomplishment, but leaks at the home level, also using some of the technology you pointed to, Felicia. The city is using new tools, new technologies out in the streets, our utility maintenance people, to find and pinpoint, to localize where there may be a leak. We learn it early, we pinpoint it fast, and when we have to tear up the street to get at it, it's much more targeted and therefore less costly. So there will be a lot of savings done in using those kinds of tools as well. Peter, over to you. Peter Dreckmeyer, as I said, former mayor, now executive director for Tuolumne River Trust. And maybe one of the things you'll tell us is whether, what was that word, healthy rivers is aptly named.
No, it's bogus. But I only have 8 minutes, so I can't vent on that too much. What's that?
He'll be nice.
Okay. Great to see you all. Thanks to the League of Women Voters, Nancy, Liz, and everybody else. You don't have to be a woman to join the League of Women Voters. I'm a member. I've been a member for a long time.
Do you have to vote?
You have to be a voter or you're strongly encouraged. But I encourage everyone, if you're not a member of the Palo Alto League, please join. We want to have more of these kinds of forums. And Sunny has yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tensions between human needs for water and the needs of the environment and all the other species that depend on water. And let's see here. So here's the Tuolumne River. You can see it starts in Yosemite National Park. Let's see if I can. I might need some help here from Felicia. What's the advance button?
It might, no.
It's not that. It's not that. Trial and error.
It's slow, so it's.
Greer, we might need your help. What's the advance button?
I think that says end.
Just using, yeah.
Oh, so I'm right.
But maybe it's. Okay,
There.
oh, there
Okay.
you go, you have pictures.
Great. Okay, so the Tuolumne River drains the northern half of Yosemite, and that's where the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir is in the national park, providing water to 2.7 million people in the Bay Area. Greer talked a little bit about that. Downstream, you see Don Pedro Reservoir, much larger. It's about 6 times the size of Hetch Hetchy. That's owned and operated by the Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts, and it's primarily to irrigate 200,000 acres of farmland. So that's the biggest user of water on the river. Greer, by the way, is a fabulous BOSCA director. We're very, very lucky to have him. I only have 8 minutes here, Greer, so I can't praise you enough, but you've done an incredible job. So these are all the consumers of SFPUC water. SFPUC water is 85% from the Tuolumne River, 15% from local watersheds. As Greer said, a third of the customers are in San Francisco, 2/3 are in the BOSCA territory in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. And back to the so Don Pedro is that big reservoir that the irrigation districts own. Upstream of that, we refer to that as the upper Tuolumne. And below that is the lower Tuolumne, which I'm going to focus mostly on. But they're very unique and different ecosystems. In the upper Tuolumne, as well as the lower, we have rainbow trout, which we also have in a lot of our creeks around here. Rainbow trout, they are born in fresh water. They can stay and reproduce in the fresh water if they're landlocked. But if they have an opportunity to get out to the ocean, they can become steelhead trout. And we have some steelhead in San Francisco Creek. And you notice it's a lot bigger of a fish. So by going out to the ocean, there's a lot more food there. These fish can get a lot larger, and they bring those nutrients back up into the ecosystem where they're going to spawn in the fresh water. So we don't have steelhead in the upper Tuolumne because of the dam, Don Pedro Dam, and also just a lot of other cute critters that depend on the fish. So it's a really important ecosystem, including for Homo sapiens. Wonderful recreation on the upper Tuolumne, class 4 whitewater, class 5 as well. It's isolated canyon. You don't see cars. Maybe you'll hear an airplane overhead once in a while, but it's just a fabulous experience if you haven't had a chance to do it. And there are wonderful swimming holes, waterfalls, good fishing. And so for all these reasons, in 1984, the upper Tuolumne River, 83 miles, was designated a wild and scenic river. And that was the reason Tuolumne River Trust came into existence, because there was a plan to build more dams in that area. And so we were founded in 1981, and we got the California Wilderness Act passed in 84, which designated the Tuolumne wild and scenic. So again, yeah, it's all right. Again, here's Don Pedro Dam. It's the 6th largest reservoir in the state. Again, 200,000 acres of farmland. Downstream of that, the Tuolumne is very different. It's starting to flow through the Central Valley, so the water's a lot flatter. It's great for canoeing, kayaking. And here's where we still have Chinook salmon. They can make it up as far as the dams. They're also called king salmon. This is an extra large one. This was over 100 pounds. Normally they get to be about 20 to 30 pounds. But you get a sense of the nutrient load that they bring up. It's like this conveyor belt of nutrients from the ocean into the upland habitat. After the fish spawn, they die. Those nutrients go into the ecosystem. They fuel the food web. They fertilize the soils, and they're really a key component of the ecosystem. Salmon are a keystone species. More than 100 other species depend on them. One story I like to tell is that a lot of the little insects in the water, the aquatic insects, will feast on their bodies, and then the baby fish will eat those insects. So the adults are giving their children, their offspring, the gift of life twice. In an average year, the big problem on the Tuolumne is only 21% of the natural flow makes it down to the San Joaquin River. So humans divert 4/5, and 1/5 is left for all the other species. And so we've seen this decline in salmon. Felicia had a graph. This shows, the goal is that black line. It's called the salmon doubling goal. And we've only once in the past 20-ish years have even hit that. So, and in the last 10, 15 years, it's been really, really low, sometimes in the hundreds, sometimes low thousands.
What's the doubling goal?
So the doubling goal, they basically, and Felicia might have been part of this, they looked at populations of salmon in different rivers between 1969 and 1991, and they doubled the average, and that's been our goal on the books of trying to reach that level, and we've been going the wrong direction. So the Tuolumne flows into the San Joaquin River. The San Joaquin River flows north into the Delta. From the north, we have the Sacramento flowing into the Delta, and the Delta is connected to San Francisco Bay. So we talk about the Bay Delta, the largest estuary on the west coast of the Americas. And here's a quote from one of my heroes. The Bay Delta is an ecosystem in crisis. Felicia was a fabulous, is it president or chair? Chair, okay. Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board, and got a lot done, willing to stick her neck out and do the right thing. It's really hard to find that kind of leadership these days. So Felicia, thank you for all you did. It's really, I mean, every year I appreciate you more.
I have to say, what Peter would do, unlike anyone else, people would show up in Sacramento to say their 3 minutes, and that was great. Peter brought people from Palo Alto, thank you everyone who went, to Merced hearings, to Modesto hearings, rooms full of folks who had a different view of it all. And that was really fantastic. It made a big difference, certainly to the 5 of us sitting there.
Well,
Peter, this won't come out of your time, but I want to elaborate on that because one of the things we talk about, it was in Greer's slide, is what you can do. And one of your points was to engage. And one way to engage is through groups like the one Peter represents. I've not gone to Merced in Peter's bus, but you can do it by Zoom. I did it on the telephone. It didn't take that much time, and it allowed me, just as a citizen, to speak for 2 or 3 minutes to the state control board on a matter involving Bay Delta. So those are the kinds of groups you can join and things you can do. You can reclaim your time, sir.
One of the highlights was on August 22nd, 2018, the Palo Alto City Council voted unanimously to support the Bay Delta plan. And the next day was the first hearing, and I got to announce that Palo Alto had endorsed. And I think everyone was kind of shocked that, the water users were all totally united about, well, if the environment benefits, then we're going to hurt. Palo Alto got it that we can do both.
Sorry to interrupt. Believe it or not, San Francisco Board of Supervisors did too. And then it got vetoed.
That's right.
What year was that again?
2018.
18.
Yeah. So you've been hearing a little bit about the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan required by the Clean Water Act. It was first adopted in 1978. It was last really updated in 1995. So it's been 30 years. Joe Simitian was in the state legislature. He championed the Delta Reform Act in 2009, and that initiated a an update of the Bay Delta Plan and created the co-equal goals of ensuring a reliable water supply and restoring the Bay Delta ecosystem. So it was finally acknowledged that the Bay Delta ecosystem is also really, really important. A little bit about the Bay Delta. Half of the precipitation that falls in California drains out through the Delta. It's, again, the largest estuary in the West Coast. I consider our Garden of Eden here. Remarkable habitat for a lot of biodiversity, more than 500 species, fish and wildlife. Major stopover for refueling for the Pacific Flyway. It's the migration corridor for salmon, steelhead, other anadromous species that share their life cycle between freshwater and saltwater. And it's changed a lot, starting with agriculture in the Delta. We've created levees, so a lot of the former floodplain habitat is no longer available. And then upstream, there's so much diversion. In an average year, only 50% of the unimpaired flow, the natural flow, makes it to the Delta. And in dry years, it might be only a third. So we've changed it dramatically. So why are flows important? They impact temperature in our rivers. Our native fish are cold water fish. They're used to that spring snow melt. And if the water is too warm, they die or can't reproduce. Obviously, they need water for migration. It's really important for the baby fish to get out of the system to make their way down to the bay and the ocean. High flows get them out quickly before they might get eaten. Floodplains are really, really important. This is habitat for the juvenile fish. They can be out of the main channel where the predators are, and they're more likely to get eaten. There's also more food in the floodplains. So that's really, really important habitat. You need water for floodplains. We've altered the Tuolumne and most of our rivers from fast-moving cold rivers to slow-moving warm streams. And so the ecosystems now favor non-native species that evolved in those conditions. You saw the water hyacinth there, and below that, bass, which are non-native. And then the slow-moving, warm, nutrient-rich water, when it reaches the delta, can trigger these toxic algae blooms, which can kill pets and wildlife and make people sick. Got a little bit ahead of myself here with the slides. So back to my hero. In 2018, State Water Board adopted it, and it took a long time. There was, a lot of pressure to stall out, but adopted 40% of unimpaired flow between February and June for the three main tributaries to the San Joaquin River. So you see the Stanislaus, the Tuolumne, and the Merced. And so unimpaired flow, think of it just what would come down the rivers in the absence of diversions and dams. And in this case, humans would still get 3/5 of the water for those 5 months, and all the other species would get 2/5. It was a compromise. The science said, really 60% of unimpaired flow would be necessary. We were at 20 in the Tuolumne, so in a way, it was kind of splitting the difference. And the irrigation districts immediately sued. The San Francisco PUC joined them, and Bosca filed their own lawsuit. Those were settled last year. And they failed. Probably the main reason why the SFPUC sued is they have this contractual obligation with the irrigation districts dating back to 1995 that they will follow the district's lead on fish flows. And, they got some stuff out of the agreement that they wanted, but they gave up their right to think and act on behalf of their constituents who, as you know, have a very strong environmental ethic here in the Bay Area. But they couldn't say, well, we oppose this because we have this terrible agreement with the irrigation districts that don't really care that much, although they're caring more nowadays. So they had to manufacture a different narrative. And this was shortly after the draft substitute environmental document. The environmental document came out. There was this editorial in the Chronicle signed by the CEOs of the SFPUC and Bosca, and it said, this plan could lead to 51% rationing, costing us up to 188,000 jobs, $49 billion in economic losses. And we said, no way. We just looked at this report and had very different numbers. So you see on the right there, The op-ed has those numbers that I just read, and they were based on a report done in 2009. And that report was hastily done. The same author, Brattle Group over in Berkeley, spent 5 years updating their projections. And they came up with these numbers in the first box there on the left. So 2.5 times less impact than the 2009 report. And the PUC said, well, that was just a draft. The 2009 was final. It's like, no, this was built on that. And then you see the final was very comparable to the draft in 2014. Never corrected that. And we would argue that these numbers could be zero. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So to check the numbers, we created a water supply calculator. We got basic data from the SFPUC about what were the conditions in the past. We looked at these 6 years, 87 to 92. You might remember that was the most severe drought on record. And what we did is we looked at, well, what if demand remained relatively flat, what it is today, and we consider the Bay Delta Plan flow requirement in this, and we don't require any rationing, and we don't develop any alternative water supplies. And what we found, that number 78, bottom right, is it's a positive number, meaning we end that drought, a repeat of the worst drought on record with the Bay Delta Plan and no rationing, with a little bit of water left in storage. Now, with the kind of rationing we're used to, we could add another year. So we could have the worst drought on record plus another really, really dry year. That's why I say, you know, maybe there's not going to be that much of an impact on the economy. But then the SFPUC said, well, we're not planning just for the worst drought on record. We're planning for something we call the design drought. And it combines the 2 worst droughts from the last century, from the 20th century. And it looks at demand of 265 million gallons per day. So just keep 265 in mind. Now, the bottom image here shows those 2 droughts, and the orange is deficit, how much below the average. And they were extremely dry droughts. The SFPUC plans for this 8.5-year drought, whereas Santa Clara Valley Water District, our closest neighbor, they're planning for the 6-year drought. I sent a note to BOSCA and these agencies and said, hey, doesn't it seem a little weird that one agency is planning for a 6-year drought and another one's planning for an 8.5-year drought? Maybe one isn't conservative enough. Maybe the other's too conservative. Why don't we have a discussion about this? Don't hear anything. I mean, that's typical. I'm the bringer of inconvenient truths. But this is, you know, here's, most of these slides are from the SFPUC. This is from their long-term vulnerability assessment. And you see it's like, well, the design drought only added 2 years to the worst drought, but you can see that the deficit, which is, you can think of it as water that needs to come out of storage, kind of like you have a bank account and you might have some income each year and you might have some expenses. If your expenses are greater than your income, you work you're out of your account. And so these numbers basically represent that. And you see that 1977 was 72% as severe as the 6-year drought. So the SFPUC is planning for a drought that's 72% more severe than what Valley Water or East Bay Mud are planning for. Seems a little excessive to me. So
Peter, I'm sorry. We'll come back to this, I'm sure, in the Q&A, and we do need to get to that Q&A. But your basic point is that the SFPUC is doing drought planning, this so-called design drought, that is 78% higher than other agencies and also worse than anything on record. Is that the point?
Yes, and you set up my next couple slides. Thank you. So everyone wants to know about climate change, and the SFPUC did a very specific study for the Hetch Hetchy watershed. Every watershed is different. A lot of places are going to experience drier conditions. What this study found was there's no clear direction in change of mean annual precipitation, meaning it's probably going to stay about the same. So it's a really high watershed, and for this system, it doesn't really matter. The snowpack isn't as important for us because as long as there's capacity in reservoirs, it doesn't really matter when it's flowing down. It's only when the reservoirs are all full, and then you lose a month or two of water. But if the reservoirs are all full, we have enough water for 6 years just in the bank. And sorry I'm rushing so much. I'm trying to keep it to 8 minutes, probably a little over already. So this shows the study looked at 100 years of observed data and 1,100 years of tree ring data and 25,000 computer model runs. And they mapped the bars here, the higher the bar, the more chances there's going to be a drought that's severe. And then on the x-axis going to the right, it's the severity of the drought. And you see, so really as the droughts get more severe, they get much less common, as you would imagine. And here we put in the design drought. So they could not produce a drought as severe as the design drought. And the SFPUC now has an alternative water supply plan. So they've created this narrative. It's like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. If the Bay Delta plan is approved, we're going to have these severe shortages. So their bosses on the commission said, well, we're not going to let that happen. Come up with an alternative water supply plan, which is based on all the same narrative, all the same, what I would call disinformation. And what it found is that, well, we might need to develop between 92 million gallons per day of alternative water supplies, which is very expensive, between 92 and 122. So that would be a cost of $17 billion to $25 billion, which I would argue could be zero. It's all the length of drought planning, demand, what demand is each year, those have a huge impact, and they've inflated both of those dramatically. So every 5 years, water agencies have to update their urban water management plan. That's about to happen again. In 2020, they looked at their projections going out till 2025 or 2045. And the blue is the Bosca demand, the green is the San Francisco demand, and you see it's going up, which they always predict demand's going to go up. You see 2025, so 5 years ago, the projection was this year the demand would be 216 million gallons per day. It's looking like it's actually going to be 190. So here's the graph over since the early 70s. And you see, when there's a drought, we're pretty good about conserving water. And then sometimes it rebounds, but not as high. But over the last decade, demand has been under 200 million gallons per day. And you might remember that the design drought's planning for 265. So that's a big, big difference. And Chris, I'm going to try to wrap up here pretty soon. Why is water so expensive? Well, the SFPUC deferred maintenance on the Hetch Hetchy system. I mean, this is more than 100 years old, and it was a cash cow for San Francisco, and they were taking money from the wholesale customers, and they weren't investing it in the system. They were investing it in Muni and other services. Palo Alto actually led a lawsuit with other Bosca agencies before Bosca existed in the late 70s and won, and basically said, you're trying to charge us more than you're charging San Franciscans, and you're not putting the water back into the system. And that kind of led to Bosca eventually becoming more powerful and having an ability to push back a little bit. But in 2008, there was a water system improvement program, 80 plus capital improvement projects, rebuilding dams, pipes, trying to make sure that the system could withstand a major earthquake so we wouldn't be cut off from our Sierra water. The price is $4.8 billion plus debt service, which essentially doubles the cost. And as a result, people started seeing, oh, my bill's going up, it's going up, going up. Price of water, SFPUC water has quadrupled since 2008. So now there's an incentive for people to take advantage of conversion of their lawns to climate appropriate plants, all the great rebates. Bosca's done a great job at encouraging conservation, and there's a good incentive to do it. And the problem's not going away. So this is the SFPUC's debt service. And that dark blue, a lot of that is paying off the debt for the the 2008 Water System Improvement Project, but they're taking on a lot other projects that weren't included in that. So you can see, in about 10 years, that's going to be up at $600 million a year. And their entire budget this year is about $2 billion. So it's a huge part of the budget. Dave Warner back there, can you raise your hand? Brilliant CFO. He's done a great analysis of all this and just an amazing person. Okay, just winding down here. This is the actual water demand since 2000. And again, blue is the Bosca customers, green is San Francisco. This is the actual. Here were their projections from their 2000 urban water management plan. So they were projecting that, demand just a couple of years ago would be up at 292 million gallons per day. It's been under 200 for the past 11 years. And then 5 years later, they did it again. And it's like, yeah, they're always expecting demand to go up. Population grows, but per capita demand has outpaced it. And we've actually reduced our overall demand. And then again in 2010. So the long history of over projecting. So this is the crux of the problem here. I don't say, hey, we're using too much water here in the Bay Area. I think we're doing a great job. I think Bosca's really, stepped it up a lot. San Francisco's got probably the lowest per capita water use in the state, or pretty close. But for us, it's the way the river is managed. So what you see, we had that drought, 4-year drought in the teens. And for 5, shows unimpaired flow. And you can't, I don't think you can see what's diverted, but the blue line's the most important thing. So for 5 years, the unimpaired flow in the lower Tuolumne River averaged 12%. 12% for 5 years of the natural flow. And then in 2017, which was that really big year, it was 79%. So basically, we starved the river for 5 years, and then all that water we conserved had to be spilled in 1 year. Now, had the Bay Delta Plan been implemented, as Felicia said, it was adopted, but has yet to be implemented, the hydrograph would have looked quite a bit different. You'd see there'd be 40% in a lot of years, and some years a little bit higher because everything fills and spills. But during that drought, we would have had 5 years of 40% unimpaired flow. And then in 2017, instead of being 79%, it would have been 44%. So we still would have spilled some water, but not all in 1 year at the expense of 5 terrible years. So that's our argument is, you come up with a reasonable drought plan, not 72% more severe than what Valley Water and others are planning for. You use reasonable demand projections. We're pretty flat around 200 MGD, maybe a little lower. And then you do the analysis of, can we manage the Bay Delta Plan? And the answer is obvious. So to answer that question, we can. We're better positioned than any other water agency to ensure that we have a reliable water supply and restore the Tuolumne River. And thank you for your patience. Sorry, I had to rush quite a bit there.
Peter, if you go back to that blue chart. The chart you showed us a moment ago with the blue bars, are the blue bars enough for the fish, for the ecosystem, for your objectives?
I'd love to hear Felicia's response to that.
I can't do it to the bar, but what our scientists' analysis showed was that if you had 40%, the fish did pretty well. And part of it had to do with the fact that you would inundate the sides, you would create the food that Peter talked about, you would lower the temperature is a really big impact on fish, both when they're coming back, let's talk salmon, when they're coming back up and it's expending all that energy, but also when they're little and they're trying to make their way out and move past the predators, et cetera, they really expend a lot of energy. So they need a place to go hide for predators. They need a place to rest. They need a place to eat. But they have to expend way more energy if the water's hotter. And the scientists have done plenty of work about what that temperature ought to be in terms of how these guys do at both ends of the spectrum. And so what all of our analysis showed was that we would do a really big improvement in the species at 40%. And then we had set this thing up that we could go down to 30 if they gave us a bang up proposal to also do habitat restoration that, say, lower the side so they'd be inundated more, and they were all working together. And I had a sense, once you put the operations people in a room and they have to work together, they solve problems. Right now, all the incentives are to fight, and the lawyers have the argument. So I also thought there was a social benefit, because that's what I've seen happen once people have to do something. But the science showed that at 30%, just the water alone would do a bunch of good, not as much as 40, but that's where we were hoping to get to, where we'd be evaluating whether these projects were good enough, but that's kind of been thrown out the window in the hope that just habitat restoration alone is going to wreak magic. And it just won't, because the habitat needs water too.
We've gone over time, and we've been unfair to our speakers to ask them to cover such a broad topic in such a short time, but it's been very helpful. And we do want Q&A, assuming you'd like to ask questions. Sunny, is there a particular method, or is it just raise your hand and ask a question? Okay, so what should those with questions do? Write them down or raise their hand? Just raise their hands. Well, there's a hand up right now. The gentleman in the middle.
Right, I thought she's coming too.
In the meantime, I don't want to create conflict on the podium here, but there have been a couple of things that I've understood to be somewhat contradictory. Snowpack, for example. We heard what you said, Felicia, at the start, that snowpack has such a big impact because of the release timing and the ability to replenish groundwater and so forth. And yet, Peter, when you referred to that long-term vulnerability study, I took away from your slide that, well, to overstate it, it doesn't really matter as if the precipitation comes, whether it comes wet in the form of rain or snow in the form of a snowpack, it doesn't matter to the river. Which one is it, or am I misunderstanding? Peter?
Well, I'd say that Felicia's absolutely correct that on a whole, on average, the snowpack is really, really important. In our situation, the SFPC has so much storage that, if they're low on storage and we're getting rain instead of snow, we're going to capture that. Yeah. So the benefit could be that maybe in the summer we have less snowpack, and so we might lose 2 months of water in a system that can hold 6 years worth. So it's just such a small percentage. But run of river agencies that are really depending on the flow each year, it's really critical. That's a really important part of their storage.
Or stuff like Shasta and Oroville, the state and federal water project that is serving like a gazillion people and export through the pumps. But again, it depends.
Peter, we heard early in the presentation that if it stopped raining for good, an extreme scenario, obviously, in the Bay Area, we have 3 years of available water. I think that was on a slide that I'm guessing may have come from our utility staff, but in any event, we heard 3 years of storage if there were no rain. I've heard you say again this evening, 6 years of storage. We have lots of storage to the tune of 6 years. Is there a discrepancy there, or?
Well, we might have been talking about two different things, but every SFPUC meeting, so they meet every other week, they will have a water supply conditions report. And it'll show you at full storage, they have 1.4 million acre feet. And our demand is 225,000 acre feet. So you find out what storage is at the time. So it'll tell you there, it's like, oh, we're down to, 1.3 million acre feet. You divide that by 225, and you can figure out, well, here's how much water we have in storage right now. At full storage, there's about 1.4 million acre feet. Divide that by 225, you get more than 6. So more than 6 years worth. Now, each year, they're also getting incoming water and they're using water. So that 6 years is only if there's no precipitation for 6 years. Otherwise, it can extend out quite a bit. And again, Dave Warner's done a lot of great analysis of this.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of questions, very blunt questions about recycling water. But first, from the audience is a very specific one. Felicia, when the state board was proposing the Bay Delta plan, this questioner says, I understand you called one of the SFPUC commissioners, perhaps it's a man named Anson, if I read this right. You called the SFPUC to support the plan. He said no. Any insights on that and whether it might change? His view might change. Does this ring a bell?
No.
Okay.
I actually don't. It may be referring to something I don't know. I don't know what it is.
If I remember correctly, Felicia, I think you had an editorial in the Chronicle that
Yeah,
said,
I
hey,
did.
you know, SFPUC, you need to be part of the solution,
Yeah.
which was really
that I
good. It was
did.
very diplomatic, and I don't
Well-
think it ruffled any feathers, but it said, you know, we're all in this together.
Well, I was just trying to point out, the thing about it is that the flows that come through the Delta are important to San Francisco too. Important to the wetlands in the bay, important to the fisheries, the crab guys, everything. And so, dilution of nutrients and the like. So it just seemed to me that I should point that out. But also I think there are solutions. I mean, it gets to the recycling. I mean, this is true everywhere. I mean, LA gave up a lot of its Mono Lake water. It managed and it started doing conservation and recycling. I mean, still they have their moments when they get a little picky about it, but you know, and water doesn't taste quite as good in the valley where I grew up than it did before, but it's saving Mono Lake. I mean, there was pressure from the state board and pressure from Audubon and a bunch of folks, but it's a choice, but it does require doing some stuff. And it's not all conservation, which San Francisco itself has done well. But as you see, it's only 1/3 of the water. There are plenty of lush landscapes. And the question is, how do you cut back on the green carpet so you can save salmon? I mean, that's really where the trade-off is, because most urban water agencies, over 50% of the use is on outdoor ornamental landscaping. We're going to need more trees, but we don't need lush green carpets everywhere. We need it at parks so kids can fall. You need it in your backyard if you have little kids so you can play catch and they can fall in. Those are useful lawns.
Thank you.
But they don't have to be bright green in the summer or in a drought.
Here's a question with an emphasis on respect for the environment. And it's a question that would certainly warm the heart of John Muir. The damming of the Hetch Hetchy flooded a spectacular glacially carved valley in Yosemite. And from the point of view of many who fought against the Hetch Hetchy damming over 100 years ago, we heard about this earlier, it was a travesty. Why don't we rely on water stored in Cherry Reservoir? And I think, Peter, you can certainly answer that because there is much more in the Hetch Hetchy system storage than just the Hetch Hetchy. Can you elaborate, Peter?
Well, just to answer for the SFPUC, what they would say is Cherry, they use that to meet their obligations to the irrigation districts who have senior water rights. And they use it to generate hydropower. So a lot of the way San Francisco operates the Tuolumne River is to generate revenue through hydropower. But that water can be, it can come to the Bay Area. So this is another reservoir just outside of Yosemite. But it would have to be filtered, and Hetch Hetchy water does not need to be filtered. So that's not something they would jump on doing, but they do have that emergency water supply. And I don't know if you asked the question, Spreck, but if someone else answered it, Spreck is the expert on restore Hetch Hetchy. So Yeah. So talk with him afterwards if you are
Thank
interested.
you. Could you just elaborate, perhaps the two of you, on this question of water rights? Who has what senior or junior rights to the Tuolumne or to perhaps the whole San Joaquin watershed?
That's a big one.
Any way we can do it quickly?
Well, Tuolumne and Modesto are senior, but part of these agreements come from the fact that
Those are the agricultural
the
districts?
agricultural districts who are, Turlock is the original irrigation district in California. They're actually doing some really interesting stuff with solar aquagrid and solar over canals. I mean, they're an interesting place. But they do have senior rights. And so in order for San Francisco to be able to have some ability to store water in New Don Pedro, to build that, because they wanted more storage than just Hetch Hetchy rights, they agreed to a bunch of different things, because they are junior, but they're still very senior. They have some senior water rights that go back to 1903 and 1906, but that just tells you how senior Turlock and Modesto are. They also have some agreements that you all probably understand a little better that limit how much they can force their contract agencies to conserve. That they also
Peter, do you want to
talked
add to
about
any of
at the
this?
other end of the spectrum. And that seems kind of unfortunate as well. So whoever negotiated all of their agreements on both ends, but they point to them when there are other things they could do. So it's like anything, it depends. It's a little of both.
Yeah, so there was an act of Congress called the Raker Act in following the great earthquake in San Francisco, and people felt sorry for San Francisco that a lot of it burned down and they didn't have a super good water supply. So that was
They cared then
1913.
in Washington, huh? They cared about San Francisco.
Yeah, back then they cared. Yeah. So that was 1913. So, and the Raker Act basically said, okay, irrigation districts, you have senior water rights. We're going to make sure you're whole. The first 2,400 cubic feet per second CFS, think of one CFS as being a basketball. First 2,400 of runoff belong to the irrigation districts. Anything above that belongs to San Francisco PUC. So if you have a big flow coming down, San Francisco gets a ton of water. Between mid-April and mid-June, that cutoff goes to 4,000 CFS. So they call it the top hat. For most of the year, it's 2,400, and then there's 2 months where it's higher. And what we did, Dave and I and some other folks, we did an analysis. This long-term vulnerability assessment, the climate change study, predicts a 3-week earlier runoff from snowpack melt. So we looked at, okay, we know the hydrology from the design drought years. Let's shift it all 3 weeks. And we found that more water moves from the time when the irrigation districts have their maximum right to where they have the minimum right. And over the course of the 8.5-year design drought, a year's worth of water shifts over to the SFPUC as a result of climate change. And we presented this to the SFPUC, and they're like, oh, well, and it's like, well, if we're wrong, correct us. What are your numbers? It's like, it doesn't fit their narrative. I mean, it's amazing. And we can't get Bosca to ask tough questions. We can get Palo Alto to ask tough questions, which was done. And the PUC said, oh, we're not going to answer questions from individual Bosca members. I mean, it's crazy.
I got to move to the next one. It brings us, this is a great one. It brings us close to home and very practical, and it's for Greer. Locally, what are water issues coming into the Palo Alto City Council and in front of Bosca where we can be supportive and do something?
Thanks for that question. I mean, there's quite a bit, and there are other water issues that we haven't talked about tonight. I chair the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority. That is a body that's made up of Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Valley Water, and one shoreline that represents San Mateo County. And we're working on preventing flooding from the San Francisco Creek. It was formed after the 1998 flooding. So we're working right now on what's called the Reach 2 project that will really bring some incredible flood relief to the city of Palo Alto, as well as our neighboring cities as well. But that's going to be a big fight, and it's a complicated process, and we're really making incredible gains there, having people show up and speak in favor of the Reach 2 project and providing this flood relief to the city is incredibly helpful. I mean, definitely having people show up, elected leaders take note, and your time is absolutely worth it. And if you can't actually show up to a meeting, sending in emails, making phone calls are all really helpful. As far as Bosca is concerned, one thing that's great is Palo Alto shows up more than I think any other city on that Bosca board to be able to speak. And I think it's making a real difference. Peter already talked about the frustration and the response we received, or at least I received from the SFPUC, trying to get additional information on the design drought and demand projections, and their response was quite dismissive. I appreciate the Utility Advisory Commission, your help in that, and Peter's as well. And fortunately, I was able to work with Tom Smagel, our new CEO, and he was able to send a similar letter requesting some information. It's not quite satisfactory yet. I think having the SFPUC and Bosca members hearing directly from their customers and their constituents will go a long way. And again, it's an issue that I don't think we're hearing much from the public. So if you start speaking out, they'll take notice. Of course, sea level rise is an issue. We're actually working right now on a levee in the Baylands, and we've got the One Water plan that's all part of our sustainability and climate action plan. You might have heard of it as SCAP, that is working on all of these issues related to water. And of course, at the end of the day, always keeping in mind water rates and how much you pay is a critical top of mind issue for us all. And so again, speaking out, you have the right under Proposition 218 to be a part of that hearing and object to water rate increases. So having your voice heard. So a lot of opportunities for you to be engaged, stay engaged, and I'm happy again to give you my contact information and you can follow up with me anytime.
Thanks, Greer. Peter, you know as well as anyone what water issues are coming up in front of, what local issues are coming up in front of council and at Bosca, and are terrific at making your case to both council and to Bosca. Anything come to mind that you think's on the agenda in the months ahead?
Well, Redwood City is having their water rates hearing in November. If anyone lives in Redwood City, that's an opportunity. I think, the important thing is, Greer mentioned that Bosca is working on a long-term reliable water supply strategy for 2050. And we're encouraging them, don't make the same mistake Palo Alto made. So Palo Alto invested $500,000 in a One Water plan, an alternative water supply plan. And it was based on the premise that we might experience 50% rationing. And so we started presenting to the UAC, Utility Advisory Committee, saying, it's ridiculous. Here are the reasons, presenting the facts. And unanimously, they agreed that this plan doesn't make any sense. We wasted $500,000. And so Bosca is now planning to spend $2 million on this long-term reliable water supply plan without asking the question of how much water do we really need? Okay, PUC is going to tell you their narrative. It's like 92 million gallons per day, $17 billion. It's like, it's political. I mean, it is so disappointing how the SFPUC has spread disinformation. They're not up here because they're scared to have a debate about it.
I'm going to move to the next question. And we will bring this to a close. I know that Sunny wants to wrap up and make a short statement from the league. I think maybe Felicia, a question that's too specific to really get into all together, but essentially it asks about data centers. If you were to build a large data center, it requires a lot of electricity and water. What kind of local approvals might be needed? I don't know if Greer, you want to speak on that. It might be too specific. How much water is needed to power data centers? It's interesting that this question refers to a data center, not in terms of the gigabits it would produce, but the megawatts that are required to drive that. And that is how in the industry, data centers are the biggest driver of electric use going forward, but they also take a lot of water, I guess. The broader question here is Is AI an emerging water issue?
Thanks. That's a question that's pretty hot these days. Of course, the first answer I have is it depends, because it's all locally driven, but they do use a lot of water for cooling. There's alternative air cooling that takes a lot of energy. So if you're doing it all with clean energy and you can make it go 24 hours a day, which we're not quite at the 24-hour-a-day mark, but there are some batteries that can ramp up and the technology is changing. And it's expensive. You could do that. But you have to look at the community and what their water resources are and what their economic bases are. A reporter asked me about surf parks, because apparently that's become a hot thing. And it kind of depends on, are you recycling your water? Is it a once-in water use? Some of it evaporates if you're using cooling, but how much water is it over time? What is it taking from? Are they purchasing as an offset on something else? I mean, a lot of times it's worthy of study, and I think that's why the legislature is considering, I think they may have passed it, I don't know if it's been signed. It's been watered down, no pun intended, but California was passing legislation that said you actually have to disclose the water use publicly so you can have a public conversation about it, and information is important, but you have to see what the comparison is. Because a lot of times what happens is, during the drought, this happened a lot, where people picked on whatever they didn't like and pointed at it as the evil culprit, whether it was fracking or new development or almonds or whatever it was. And the answer still is, it depends. In Sonoma County, I'll just give you an example. There was a hospital that wanted to come in, and the community wanted the hospital. But what they did is they made the new hospital, just like some communities make new housing developments, retrofit all those communities and houses, and get them new toilets, get them new shower heads, get them new. You can retrofit our old infrastructure and save water. So you just have to have the data centers compensate. And then you've got to see who else the other water user is in town that maybe they can buy water from. So again, I don't mean to be simple. It is absolutely something to follow, because the energy and the water use of these is really high, but you can't just broad brush them, because every technology is different, every location is different.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the speakers. There are a couple of questions that perhaps you can connect afterwards. Dr. Landman, for example, has a detailed one that Felicia, perhaps you could speak to about, but you can catch the speakers maybe on the way out. Again, a round of applause for the four of you. And thank you so much for coming out. And Sunny, could you wrap it up with
I
your
was going to
parting
say
comment?
that a round of applause for you and for everybody who came in tonight and would like to have their support. Support their organizations. They are dedicated volunteers. And I think that if you need to know more about it, and I'm sure you've learned a lot tonight, visit their website, support them, get engaged, be involved. And I'm the membership director for the League of Women Voters, and I'm here to also ask you to get the postcards that will tell you more about our wonderful organization and how you can get involved. And we have something for you to take home. It's a freebie for tonight. And again, thank you all, and thank you so much. Good evening.